Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to host two of the, I guess, most accomplished electric violinists in northeastern Pennsylvania, and somebody that inspired me to pick up the electric violin because you're the first person that I saw, Nyke Van Wyk. Something about those harmonics on the violin. And the violin. Wow. Nyke, it's such a pleasure, man. I'm so psyched that you're here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's for everybody who's seen Musical Musings before, I've had some really great guests. And you're the first violinist that I've had. Now, we could talk about a lot of things, but when we were just playing, I thought about St. Patrick's Day being something that happened recently, and we've only really talked, I think, 2 times.
Yeah.
Seriously, and they were long, nice conversations, especially the last one. And you mentioned you played Celtic music or Irish music.
So yeah, I trained primarily classically to begin my violin journey, if you will. And then about 13 years into that, I switched over. I shouldn't say switched over because I still continued my pursuits in classical music, but I switched to studying a lot of Celtic and Irish music because my mom is very much Irish. And my father is 100% Holland Dutch. When we moved to Pennsylvania, I had to classify the difference between Pennsylvania Dutch and Holland Dutch.
What is the difference between?
Well, Holland Dutch being from Amsterdam overseas versus.
Other than.
Right, locationally.
Is there a musical?
Just so my father, getting into that side, I grew up with him playing guitar and playing, and he was in the theater and actually built Broadway plays and built sets for massive like touring groups. Like he built sets for Kiss and Simon and Garfunkel and Rolling Stones. I don't know if we ever got into this. So
no, but you did mention that you'd experienced both sides of.
Absolutely.
Setting up equipment, which is kind of vital for, I'd say, a modern musician to really, if you know that stuff, you can work with people so easily. And you're probably the easiest person that I've ever had to work with. We had a studio session, it was probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, with Aaron Fink. I think it was even longer than 2 years ago, I believe. So, yeah.
And I was so impressed by how you just had such command in the studio, but it was a very gentle command. Like you knew what you were doing, you knew how to articulate it, and you knew your gear, your instrument, and you had a clear picture of what you wanted to do, even though we were coming together with no
prior, like that was the first time we stepped in a room together. So
there wasn't even a string part.
It was good. And Dan
King,
thank you,
fantastic cellist.
Amazing. Yeah, the three of us we sat in there, and I was amazed by you. Not to just keep going back and forth. I mean, I could brag on you the whole time as well. I mean,
thank you, man.
I've never sat in a session where I had another violinist who could lock in real quick with what's going on with my mind up here and quickly transposing it into notation and sheet charts, whatever. That was quick, and I was impressed by that as well. So
thank you.
A lot of cool magic happening that day for sure.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, I'm so glad that we got to it initially. I do have some things written down to get us into this, okay? And it's that the imagination is such a key component to becoming a well-rounded individual and musician.
Absolutely.
And there are plenty of scientific studies that have come out indicating that it's good to have music in our lives from a young age. But what I've found in my journeys and travels and speaking with musicians like yourself, the people that start really young have a different way of doing it. It's like an expression of themselves.
It is. I feel like just as much as you're learning a language to speak and reading literature,
yes.
I started reading notation prior to actually learning how to read literature in a book, or I started when I was 5. So that all kind of came together. So for me, this is just as very much of an extension of this arm as anything else, and reading music. And it also gave me, I think we've spoke about this, I don't know if this is going in a different territory, but
we can take it wherever you want.
Yeah, when I learned how to read literature, we started to realize from a young age, and thankfully it actually came about from learning how to read notation. We realized that I had a little bit of dyslexia and a tracking problem. Yep. So when I would play just drills, nobody could pick up on it because you know how drills are. You're not really playing anything that's musical. It's not like a recognizable line. It's just drills to learn. Okay, my fingers are placed here on the string. Blah blah blah. Which string am I playing? I want to make sure I'm, so on of the angles of the bow.
The physical aspect of it, kind of like learning gymnastics.
Absolutely. But if you're in the other room, like if you're in the kitchen listening to me, it doesn't make any difference because it's all gibberish to anybody who's just listening to that. But as soon as somebody would sit down and play with me, I was fine. I could play straight across. As soon as no one else was performing with me, they would notice that I would go from line 1 and I would jump down to the 5th line and then come back up to the 2nd line and then down a 3rd line, and I would jump all over the page, and every so often I'd switch notes around because that very partial bit of dyslexia. So they were able to catch that quick because I started learning to read music prior to learning how to read literature. And then we were able to kind of concentrate on how to fix that and to develop that so it wasn't an issue for the rest of my life. So still takes me a little, when it comes to sight reading music, again, another reasons why I kind of like veer away from charts is because sight reading has never come easy to me. I've been able to develop it over the years. And I remember you were telling me that you found a way to develop sight reading a lot quicker.
The therapy that you did, which was natural, it was just your natural interest in music. Yeah. I've seen a lot of evidence that would really indicate that people that may have developing cognitive issues, I mean myself included, I feel like music has been healing for me. And the thing that you said though that really made me think, is there's a big concern for me right now, and I'd like to ask you a couple questions about it. But where it stems from is that, like you just said, that human interaction that you get when you're making music with another individual, like we just did. we didn't rehearse that. We just kind of, like, this is one of the key secrets to being a master musician, I think, or an aspiring one, because it's endless mastery is one of the themes of this
Absolutely.
program, especially in that you want to try to rehearse what you can, but know when it's going to impede your freshness.
Right. Listen, even when we were just messing around right there, there's going to be wrong notes, there's going to be, you know, things aren't played well, but then there's always the magic of even just like, we looked at each other and we both hooked on that same, like the line from Coldplay and Chainsmokers there and just came together. It was just one of those things that, you know, was not like pre-rehearsed or anything else. And as you said, I think kind of doubling down on what you said is when it comes to a performance, like even if you're somewhat improving, you always know that there's going to be a certain amount of, there's a certain space for an improv. So it's still like a rehearsed improv, if you will, for performance live. Now, if you're just off on your own and you're just improving, making whatever up, like the world's your oyster, just
That's
go
fine
for it.
too.
So, but then in a performance situation, even if there's an element of improv throughout the entire group, like the drummer's going to play a different groove.
Right, like when you're making music with other people, it's kind of like, let's use the English language so that we have got something that we can relate to, or whatever language it is that one speaks with other people.
100%, yeah.
But music is the one language that transcends
Universal.
all of them, which is such a wonderful thing. So this is a dual-fold question. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, your current and future goals, and what motivates you and drives you forward. And if you might add, what are the qualities that you feel are necessary for professional musicians in this current age?
Cool. So I think first and foremost, especially for young performers and young violinists, but outside of just the violin, any instrument, any what's the word I'm looking for? Any
Discipline, really, in the fine arts or...
Absolutely, and anything even outside of fine arts. But basically what you want to do is, especially an instrument, you want to dial in those basics, obviously. So you can't drive a car without knowing how a car is operated, turned on, blah, 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 right? So if you just pick up a violin, you try to put it on his shoulder and mess around, it's not going to work. So definitely you want to spend some time working out the basics, learning from somebody who can teach you. Am I going down the right path here?
Yeah, I'm thinking inside.
Yeah.
The thirst, it's like the thirst to become better, to become the best, puts us in that mentality where we're open to learning new things, because really I think we're capable of beyond what anybody really even understands, because we've really never experienced an age where everybody had musical training and good discipline. But if you look at maybe our grandparents, they were a product of, I think, that artisan age.
I think what you're saying is like from, especially in that generation where you'd have to sit down at a piano. If you want to learn how to play piano, you have an instructor who sits down you and makes sure you're sitting up straight and you're at the piano the way you need to play. Yep, exactly. So, but in today's world, you have the internet, you have YouTube, you've got all these other alternative ways to learn. But I think so many people want to jump into, I want to be the next rock star, regardless of what instrument, whatever they're doing. And it's like right away, how do I get from point A to point B? And they want to shortcut it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And shortcuts are great for certain things, but when you're trying to pick up an instrument for the first time, you definitely want to learn, because it's not even just a matter of, okay, you have to do this to be a proper violinist. No, it's if you don't hold the violin correctly, you're not going to get the right tone. You could damage yourself by incorrectly playing any instrument, like pianos. If you're playing flat fingers, eventually you're gonna cause issues with your. Yep.
I think you do it like this, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So the importance to kind of dial in those basics, I think, are essential.
And should be maybe at the
Right.
forefront if somebody's trying to learn a musical instrument.
Absolutely.
Look. There's plenty of resources, but you said YouTube and with the internet.
Yeah, and it's just make sure that you do your research before you go out and follow somebody. You don't want to just follow some, no name out there in the world on YouTube, or somebody who's just starting themselves. So you want to find somebody who has been at it for a while, who has the fruit on the tree, if you will.
Right.
And then, and from there, everybody's journey is different. Somebody could pick up and master the basics in a handful of days and weeks, versus somebody who might spend more time, kind of dialing it in a little bit more, getting used to it. If you're already playing other instruments, it might be easy to kind of come into some of the other fundamentals of music. If you're a guitarist as well, how your fingers are placed on a fingerboard. So, but once you get past that point, again, dialing into a certain regiment of practice, whether it be a certain genre, as classical, or for me, Celtic and Irish, or if you even want to jump into a jazz or an alternative type of style of playing, you know what I mean? But to get those fundamentals down, then you can kind of jump from one to another.
So
And
there's a certain point, right, where we both got to when, and I'm grateful that you also acknowledge and can share in the experience of having a classical upbringing. I wouldn't say that's a prerequisite, but I would have to say that I've learned different techniques on the violin, many different techniques, and tried some of my own as you have. But when you've got over 250 years of knowledge that's been passed down, and the master teachers that were like our grand teachers, I guess you could say, they were so incredible. And what a lot of people don't know is back in the day before they had the Xbox, of course, and all these different computers and cell phones now, I feel like I'm like, don't watch the television, but it's way beyond the television that can distract us. There's got to be a way that we can utilize our faculties and be able to utilize the technology. And I found a way to do that, and I see that you have too. You got a pretty cool setup there for a violinist.
there's a couple toys.
Mind if we talk about that for a moment?
By all means. So
What's your rig for?
So the bottom guy here, don't pay much attention to that. That's just a traditional DJ rig, and it's a rig that I use. It's not necessarily what every DJ is going to use. So what we really have rocking here, I don't know if you can get a shot of this or maybe something later, but at on the floor level here for my feet, I've got a floor pedal.
Yes.
That is completely MIDI only. So a lot of people kind of get off topic and they say, or they get.
Like we are. No, I'm just kidding.
They see this and they think all the magic is happening here, when really this is just a shell.
That just sends electronic signals,
It just
right?
sends data into
MIDI is an essential component nowadays with the technologies, because basically it makes that an extension of
the computer. So
you don't have to touch the computer. You can play as a one-man show.
right. So basically right now, even I've got the electric that's muted. If I pull it back in, it's a simple click. Now, to set this up, it takes a little bit of kind of a learning curve to get everything put together, but essentially, with the computer, it makes it very easily, because I can just put it into learn mode and say, I'm going to click this switch, and I want it to be mapped to this particular process, you know what I mean?
So, for example, you could program button 1 to turn the power on and off the computer.
Not quite powering on things enough, so that you still have to do yourself. Once you're within the program.
Within the software.
Yeah, once you're within the program. Cool. So that's still all traditional setup. But then as soon as we go here, like I've got this expression pedal over here, so it will pull in as much delay as I want. So it'll send my signal from my violin to a delay that's in the computer, and it lets you dial everything in as far as, okay, so if I have a delay coming on, if I want to put in just a touch of delay, I'm pressing down the expression just a bit, and this is all basic, right? And then I can tap in where I want my delay to be, so that way how fast is it gonna bounce back with your BPMs, right? So this is all done right with inside. I'm using main stage over here.
Now, could you show us while you're doing it?
Sure.
Would do.
So here's no delay. So I'll just do single notes here so you can hear. So that's just no delay. I got a little reverb on in the background. I push down this pedal, let's say about halfway, and you can hear the delay just a tiny bit. I push it in a little bit more. I got your delay. Now,
Fully on. Yeah.
full on, here you go. And here's the difference. I can change the BPM of the delay. So now it's a little faster, right? So same basic knowledge you could have with any delay pedal that you've already got, whether it's a standalone stop box or if you get like a multi-effects rig. I also use outboard gear, where I use a lot of lexicons and other outboard gear for my reverbs and delays, which I have a rig with the racks mounts all in there, and I use the computer as a head control unit. So basically this pedal still is sending MIDI and it's going into main stage, and I've started to mess with Ableton a little bit.
Stage, yeah.
Yep, main stage is basically a live version of Logic, if you're familiar with Logic.
I like Logic better than Ableton. I like the way Ableton sounds, though, and I like the way main stage sounds. It's very cool to see this because, as you probably know, I use an iPad for everything.
Right, yeah.
And this is, I could tell. I mean, you said your father was building Broadway show
Right.
sets and things like that. I mean, that's quite a skill set to take on, and I think it's kind of like you're kind of like a Renaissance man.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
What keeps you on that edge? Like what drives you to continue to learn these things? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, to jump in. So again, that's kind of multifaceted. So the first thing I'm always concerned with is tone. And again, being a classical and even a Celtic player, you want to find the right sounding violin. And I have an acoustic here that I looked for several years for a particular tone. So I went into all these different violin shops and tried to find the violin that resonated in the tone I want. So
it's like your voice, right?
Because another violinist might not like the tone of this violin compared to what they like, which could be an airier, more top end as far as the treble side of the violin goes. For me, that's always number one, is starting with tone. And as soon as you translate from acoustic over to electric, now you have signal paths and things like, you're getting a very dry signal out of a violin with a pickup. So you're not getting the natural, reverberations from the violin itself, let alone a room. So you're going direct in. So you want to try to create that space, but also tonally, where some electric violins have a very harsh and nasally kind of tone versus a warm, and for me, inviting tone. So I try to look for violins that both are Eric. I wish I had Eric Casito's violin from Ithaca Stringed, because that's by far my favorite electric violin. Absolutely. And he has that built out of mahogany.
He got to check out a bridge violin, because I have this.
Yeah.
And he was explaining to me that an instrument that's electric, regardless, or acoustic, it's not going to sound any better than it sounds kind of acoustically.
Right.
So this is made out of this is a Kevlar carbon fiber.
Yeah. Composite,
and there's a pocket in here.
Yep, it's hollowed inside.
And that resonant pocket, I feel it's like the lungs in the human being. When you have just a stick violin, I don't feel like it has the warmth, so you got to do more with the effects.
Right.
And
toning it in.
But still.
EQ. And then same with this one. This is a Glasser violin.
Yes.
And this is completely carbon fiber. So you're losing that natural. Like, one of the things I love about Ithaca stringed instruments is it's still natural.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
IthacaString.com.
Yep. But yeah, I look for a violin. Obviously, you're going to lose certain characteristics when you find violins that don't have, like you said, like a natural acoustic tendency, right? But you get different cool things. Like, there's some that are clear see-through. So if you're looking for the aesthetics, and it comes with fiber optics and LEDs and everything else, they could look really cool, but you're losing.
There's a lot of gimmicky stuff out there.
There is.
How do you bypass that? How did you get?
So very easy, because for me, you want to be comfortable, and you want, nobody looks cool when they're trying to look cool, right? Make sense?
Yes, it totally does.
So the thing for me is, the gimmicks are cool, and I don't want to get a light up violin that just lights up different colors the whole time, because then it just looks like that's the gimmick, right?
Sorry.
No. So for me, it's like, dial in your tone.
I don't look like that when I play, do I?
No, not that I know. Dial in your tone, dial in your sound, dial in who you are first before you start to go out and get the gimmicks, because a lot of people like to just go out and get the thing that's shiny and this and that. But if you learn how to be comfortable in your own skin with just an acoustic violin or just an acoustic guitar or without any effects, I love my effects. I love different sounds, different tones. I'm a huge U2 fan, and if you ever watched, what was the movie called? It Might Get Loud, and it's him. It's the three guitarists, not Jack Black. It was Jack White, and then Jimmy Page, and the three of them sit there and talk about their guitar tones.
Great guitar.
Yeah.
If somebody was interested in learning your way of doing this, what have you got that you could share in regards to on the horizon, as well as resources, and how can people find you, contact you?
So for contact and probably anything, you can go through my website, which is just NykeVanWyk.com. And then
that's NYK.
NYKE, V as in Victor, ANWYK.com. And then the social media pages that all list along with those as well.
Perfect.
So anything, just type in Nyke Van Wyk or even Nyke Violin, and I'm sure you'll find it. So,
what a cool name, too, right? And I would like to play something else with you.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got in mind?
You wanted to do something that would just basically be utilizing us both doing some effects stuff with a rhythm. I'll just do a rhythmic. I'm not even going to change the effect. I'm just called a. Want to do Come Together?
Come to get a song.
this come together.
I was gonna say, I'm not sure. Yeah. Just keep rocking that. Where you going with this? There you go. Keep that rocking. Cool, hang on.
I've stumbled into the healing realms of music in the sense that I was part of a project called Art Heals, or became Arts Heal. And it's something that's happening locally here. I know you're active in your community as well, promoting the arts, and you're in. Could you mention a little bit about the?
So arts, I've been fortunate. Basically, I started working performing Music Fest when I was working with my buddy Scott McKenna back in the day. So as early as maybe a couple years after high school, started working with a gentleman named Craig Thatcher down in my area. He's got the Craig Thatcher Band, and he's been with Music Fest, I think, since pretty much the creation. I want to say he's over 35 years of Music Fest at this performing. So I've been performing for Music Fest and different Arts Quest performances for well over, I want to say 15, close to 20 years now. What we've been trying to work now is I've been speaking to them about putting together programs for schools, which they have been doing for a while, going and talking to the younger students both in elementary schools, middle schools, and up into high school. But I think you and I had a conversation about this on the phone too. It's tough to reach students once they've gotten kind of into that high school. Sometimes middle school is kind of right about
just start younger.
Yeah.
And I think there's a science behind it, like age 3 to 5, and I mean it could be pre-birth. My mom started playing music knowing that I would become a musical prodigy. At least that's what people consider me, and I think people would consider you the same thing.
I appreciate it.
And I would think that anybody could become like that if people just tried it out. You know, I mean, it's pretty cool. But then there's age 11 to 13. It could be earlier, but they say that that's when we're creating the most neurons. So you're able to learn. You can, if you never picked up an instrument like the violin, you could pick it up when you're 50 years old if you've had some type of disciplines that I could relate to. I could probably show somebody, but I know that it would probably be optimal for anyone to pick it up before the age of 13 if you want to become is good or better than us. It's definitely possible.
Yeah. It's just as anything else, as you get your primary years and the early. Yeah. The earlier you get started with anything, and that's and I love when somebody comes to me and they say, "Hey, I want to get my kid interested in the violin," and
just play, and then you say, "Okay, just what do you say?"
Well, for me, I say if you want your kid to get interested in the violin, bring them around an area where they're going to have influence from seeing other violinists, and if they don't want to play violin, don't force them.
Right.
Do not force your kid to play something they don't want to play. In fact, if you want them to be a musician, that's great, but let them find that. Put them in an area, put them in like an environment where they're going to be around music, and if they love it, they're going to find what they want to do with it. If they are there and they want to still play soccer or football, by all means, let them go do that.
They'll be better at sports too.
Yep.
I just would love to play some music. I'm getting to that point where I can't even talk anymore. I'm like, let's just play.
Sure. What do you got in mind?
What would you like to play? I'll back you up. It doesn't matter what it is.
How about we reverse the roles for a second and we go.
That's hip. How about that?
That works fine.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for letting me play on your instrument today. Thanks for joining us, and we wish everybody a wonderful day. And for anybody who's interested in following music, Nyke is a perfect example of somebody who is able to enjoy what he does. He works really hard. He gets great gigs all over the world, and I really admire you.
Well, I appreciate that very much. The admiration is mutual. I appreciate that.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you. Awesome.
My pleasure. I've got a piece that I wrote for the playwright Jason Miller.